Okay, so we're going to cover the fires in Oklahoma and New York and coming up out of the ground in Texas with the green flames, just like we saw about a month ago in Cleveland coming up out of the ground. Yes, look at the green flames. Look at the manhole lid flopping around on the top. There were multiple fires around this campus, not just this one spot. Here they're showing some more video from the other fires around campus, but we'll go to Marfoogle for a better look at that. Here it says an explosion at a substation has sparked chaos at Texas Tech, causing fires, power outages, and evacuations across parts of the campus. According to the mystery, eerie green flames have been shooting from a manhole. Officials have confirmed they are responding to multiple fires, forcing nearby buildings to be cleared as the situation unfolds. What the hell is going on underneath there? Here, Marfoogle's going to cover some of the other fires besides the one that has these eerie green flames coming out of it. And then we'll go back to the one that happened a month ago in Cleveland with the same color flames coming out of it, coming out of the manholes. These were actually happening clear back in like 2019. There were flames coming up out of the storm drains and people were like, it's methane. It must be a methane leak, but it's a storm drain, not a sewer pipe. Don't worry about it. So here's some of the other videos from around that campus. Besides the one, there were multiple underground fires. And here's a piece of a video I made between 1 and 2 months ago, underground electro fire explosion in Cleveland, plus Project Blue Binky, where you can see something very similar happen right here in just a second. Same color flames. Neon green, that should give us a clue as to what type of gas it is. But there you saw it was just one explosion. In the one we just watched, it was a continuous ongoing explosion that kept that manhole flopping around on top of the asphalt. A continuous ongoing compression event, not just one where it blows it off and now it's off and all the fuel has been burned, but a continuous ongoing fire compression that kept that manhole dancing on top of the asphalt. So this is a video 25 minutes long surveying Oklahoma fire damage that just happened like yesterday. It's all video from a helicopter overhead. I'm just going to cover a couple of parts of this and leave the link in the description so you can watch it yourself. The couple parts I'm going to cover is what proves it's plasma fire. And I'm not going to try and put it in a nutshell for newcomers. Newcomers, if you don't know about plasma fire, the underground electricity, a fluctuation in the magnetic field creates a surge of ground current and all the burn patterns that prove this. Watch the video I made a couple months ago titled Plasma Fire 101 Overview for Beginners, and all the links in the description of that video, the description and the pinned comment. As he pans out, you'll see the fractal burn pattern on the upper right hand side of the screen. That's what happens when you apply electricity to wood. Is these burn patterns like what you're seeing over here, the intermittent burn pattern? That's an indicator of electricity. A process I call ground scorch is what's leading to the blackened ground with unburned trees sticking up out of it. Lichtenberg burning is also another name for that pattern. Fire does not create all of these patterns. Electricity does. In this screenshot from that video, you can see this tree over here is burning at the bottom, like from the inside. But also, notably, they're all burned on the right-hand side and not burned on the left-hand side. Same thing with this tree. Burned on this side, unburned on this side. Burned on this side, unburned on this side. That's the proof positive signature of plasma fire. I've documented that many times, most recently in the Yellow Lake plasma fire last summer that was here near me, where I went out boots on the ground to show you evidence of this. Just thought I'd do a little walk and talk. That one's the same thing. This one, only burned on the back side, unburned on the front side. It looks like this one's the same thing. I'm going to tell you that's Lichtenberg burning. You'll see. Not sure how well you can really see that. You'll see the same pattern. On, there we go. That's Lichtenberg burning. Fractal burn patterns. Of trees right here demonstrates plasma fireworks in mysterious ways. This grove of trees right here demonstrates they're all burned on the back side, unburned on the front side that's facing us. And that is pretty much what you see on all the telephone poles these days. All of them have this discoloration at the bottom, and oftentimes they'll have one strip of discoloration going up one side. So here we'll just walk around and show you. This is what the unburnt side looks like with the reddish bark, and hopefully the lighting will help show that burnt on the back side. Every one of these is the same. Burnt on the back side, unburnt on this side. Unburnt on this side. Burnt on the back side. Each one of these trees. Yeah, this one kind of shows it a little better. Unburnt on this side, highly burnt on this side. Circle around back to the unburned spot. Burnt on this side, unburnt on this side, back around to the burn side. Same thing on all of them. Huh? You see? And most of them are only burnt up to a certain height. Like right here is where it stops on this one. About the same height on all of them. Right there's about where it stops on that one. This one, the light's in our eyes, but right about there. This is also what you saw in Paradise. A lot of the trees were only burned up to about 20 feet. Radiating up to a certain height. During a plasma fire, that height grows. And that energy comes up through the tree and goes out a certain direction. I think all of these had it coming up and going out that direction. This is also a pattern seen in Paradise. So now when you're looking at these trees in this Oklahoma fire, and you can clearly see it's burnt on the right, unburnt on the left. This one, oops. Burnt on the right, unburnt on the left. Likewise with the one over on the right-hand side. So that's proof positive plasma fire. Fire doesn't work that way. This is a house, and you'll notice there's a perfect straight line right here. On one side of that line, the house is demolished. On the other side, the structure is still standing. It looks like it's been burned inside. It's been gutted, but the rest of the structure is still standing, and it looks like it's directly in line with the concrete. That line goes all the way through and comes out the other side. Maybe there's an underground power line there. Maybe it's under a sewer and water line. But clearly one half of the house burned very differently than the other half. And that resembles a famous photo that came out of Paradise where it looked like a house was lasered in half. One half completely demolished, the other half completely untouched. On this one, you can see the The half that's still standing did burn somewhat inside, but there's clearly a big difference between the side that burned and the side that didn't. All of the rust on the metal, that's another indicator of the electrolysis that happens in these plasma fires. And as you can see, nothing around that house burned. Just the house. There's many of these where the house is burned to the ground and the foliage around the house is untouched. This happens to be one of them. That's another indicator of plasma fire. And people can't fathom the idea that electricity comes up through the ground and filaments of electricity like underground lightning fingering and branching off in different directions, and one of those branches came up and touched this house from below. So instead they say, no, it must have been an ember came down on the house from above. The embers didn't come on down and burn anything else around the house, just the house. Completely unburned foliage literally touching the house that was burned down to its foundation. Fire doesn't work that way.
So it may be unreliable, but I'll...
And there's a lot of ground scorch where the ground is black, but it's got unburned trees sticking up out of it. And then you can see all the little white ash skeletons of the trees. That's something that I've gone over before. It's like the tree falls over and you can literally see the branch pattern of the tree laying on the ground. The ashes form the shape of the tree. It doesn't just burn straight down into a pile where the base of the tree is. The tree actually falls over because at center mass, it burns out. Anyway, I'll leave this link in the description so you can look at all the aftermath yourself. There's already enough evidence. This is plasma fire, from the fractal burning pattern to the way that it burns things down and leaves the trees standing even in the midst of the black ground scorch. And the trees being burned on one side and not the other and repeating this pattern. It's definitely plasma fire. Case closed. Here you're going to say, where's the flame, by the way? There's no flame over here. It's like it's just smoldering without flame. How do things burn without flame? Electricity. Look at this line of fires along that tree line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. There's probably 100 different fires. And it's not that one started from an ember that came from the other. The wind is blowing to the left. If the wind was blowing in alignment with all those fires, you might be able to say one blew an ember down the tree line to start the other. That's just one example. There's probably over 100 fires burning in this Oklahoma area right now, and one did not start the other. They were all started by the underground electricity coming up through the ground. Structure is completely burned with a little ring around the structure, and trees in between standing and untouched. I'm not going to go over all the patterns that I recognize and try and explain it to a person who doesn't know. After I've been doing this for 7 years, if you're not willing to watch Plasma Fire 101 overview for beginners and the links in the description and pinned comment thereof, then you're just not going to be able to take this course and be in this classroom. I cannot cater to people that want me to put it in a nutshell. Fluctuation of the magnetic field creates a surge of ground current. Skywatch Media shows us this through the graphs online that are available to the public, one which monitors the magnetic field, another which monitors ground current. That is electricity in the ground. And he shows that when there's a fluctuation in the magnetic field, there is simultaneously a surge of ground current. You want it in a nutshell? There's your nutshell. The Skywatch Media video that I'm referring to is in the links in the description of Plasma Fire 101 for beginners. I cannot compress 7 years of research into a bumper sticker for you. If you're not willing to do a little effort, put in a little of your own time after I've put in 7 years, this will be the 8th summer. My first summer filming Plasma Fire was 2018. Do the math. It's a full 7 years later. We're coming up on the 8th summer. I can't compress that into a nutshell for you. If you want to understand the subject, you'll have to do a little homework. The initiate must initiate themselves. As you'll see, structures were singled out. Nothing burned around it. Yet the structures are turned to ash because they contain more conductive material like metals. It's a pattern we've been over and over. Plenty of people here already recognize it. To try to articulate it for a newcomer, to get them up to speed, is not something I'm interested in doing anymore. There's more of it. Structures completely turned to ash, unburned foliage all around them. Fire doesn't work that way. Also, the trees sticking up out of the scorched ground. It's a term I coined called ground scorch. And their camera goes in and out as they're filming from the sky here. Link is in the description. You can watch the whole thing. But it's definitely plasma fire in Oklahoma. We'll watch this one. Notice nothing's burned around the house. Half of the house has disappeared. The other half is still standing. Fire doesn't work that way. It has something to do with the electrical magnetic field, probably an underground conduit, whether it's fiber optic cable, electrical line, sewer line. There's something that caused one half of the house to burn much differently than the other half, and a perfect straight line between the two halves. And that something has to do with the electrical current that is associated with these fires, and nothing around the house is burnt. Clearly, something reached up and touched this house from below. Or it was an ember that blew in the air and landed on the house and nothing else around the house, just the house. Plenty of other examples of this where structures are turned to ash and around them is a lot of unburned foliage. It's not dew. Speed it up a little here. Show you a couple more of these. And we're going to watch the very end of this video. It made me start cracking up. I literally started laughing out loud. At the end of this video, they splice on, I think it's a girls' basketball game in a gymnasium where the lights are flickering. And they say, oh, well, the lights flicker when you got to change out the bulbs at the end of the lifespan of a bulb. By the way, there's another indicator, straight line burns. Burned on the right, unburned on the left, like there is a fence line there. And the electromagnetic field that is causing the burning interacts with the fence line. I've seen that hundreds of times. Fire is no respecter of fence lines. It would burn right under the fence and not create a straight line burn. This straight line burn runs from clear up here, clear down, and then makes a right angle turn and goes left right there. That's another indicator of plasma fire. So at the end of this video, they splice in something that has absolutely nothing to do with the subject here. And they cut to the part of the story, they just snip it in 30 seconds at the end, of flickering lights at a girls' gymnasium basketball. And they say, oh, well, they start to flicker at the end of the lifespan, the old bulbs, and you got to go up and change those bulbs, and it takes about 30 minutes. Do you think the newscasters, whoever spliced that in the editing room, knows that that story actually has something to do with these fires that they're covering? Yes. It's the electromagnetic field of the Earth that's fluctuating, that's causing this flickering light phenomenon and also causing these plasma fires. Both have to do with the weakening and fluctuating magnetic field of the Earth. And it is hilarious the way right at the end of a half-hour worth of fire coverage, they go to the flickering lights and splice on 30 seconds about the flickering lights right at the end of this coverage. Again, there's one burning. That might even be like a pile of hay bales, like what you see across the way from that burning pile, but there's nothing around them that's burning. Anyway, I'll leave the link in the description. You can watch for yourself. But yeah, there's hay bales right across from them. That was probably another stack of hay bales that was burning right there. And that is something that could conceivably light up because of an ember blowing in the wind. By the way, in these fires, they had the typical wind pick up out of nowhere. I've gone over that. It's called electric wind or ionic wind. And it coincides with these plasma fires, both of which happen as a result of a fluctuation in the magnetic field. It creates the wind and the fires and the flickering lights. Look, same video, so they go from the fires, you see they're still flying around checking out the fires, and then the camera goes out. See if we can fast forward it here a little bit. Then the camera goes out and they have about a full minute of dead air, black screen, and whether or not they meant to, it's very ironic that they cut to this. This is the very next scene.
But because they're the old lights, those bulbs have to cool down, come back on, which is about a 20-minute process.
Hard to play games with so many delays, but final scores in 3A boys Millwood wins going for their 7th.
Now he said something about having to wait for the bulbs to cool down and then change them out, and that takes 30 minutes or whatever. Read the text on the screen. Your lights flicker and it's back on, but because they are the old lights, those bulbs have to cool down, come back on, which is about a 20-minute process. This particular incident may be unrelated, but the overall larger phenomenon that Mr. MB3 has been covering, where he's got over 300 locations now and about 700 videos from the last 3 or 4 months of these flickering lights, in my opinion, is directly related to the plasma fire, and both the flickering lights and the plasma fire are related to the fluctuating magnetic field. Now to the fires in New York that happened about a week ago, and it's multiple fires, again with the high winds. As usual, the winds pick up right as the fires start, and they're going to show you the reporter has a hot spot pop up out of the ground. That's in her words. This smoke popped up out of the ground, out of the frozen ground, while she's standing there reporting, and she shows you a melted metal sign. Talk about that more here in just a second.
New York, dangerous brush fires creating a dramatic scene Saturday on the ground and in the air as smoke billowed for miles just east of New York City in Long Island. Dozens of departments coming together to battle the flames. Those efforts slowed by strong wind gusts that caused the fires to spread rapidly. And those winds are expected to continue through this afternoon, prompting fears from the governor of a multi-day event. News Nation's Caitlin Becker is live this morning on Long Island in the town of West Hampton Beach, where we're getting a first look at the fire's overnight damage. Good morning, Caitlin. Can you describe the scene? What are you seeing on the ground?
The ground, oddly enough, is frozen. You don't usually get wildfires or brush fires in the freezing cold. But look at how hot the temperature has gotten. What was a metal sign on the side of the road here is completely decimated. And now it's about containment. As I said, it's really cold out here and the wind has died down. But even though you don't see the plumes of smoke, it is permeating everywhere. I mean, we've been smelling it all morning. And just as I'm talking to you, a hot spot actually popped up over here. So you can actually see on the frozen ground, the smoke coming up from this area. Now we're keeping our distance from that, obviously, because we don't want to get too close because that area of the ground is really hot. But this is what firefighters are up against. Even in this area that is completely scorched, you're seeing hot spots. I mean, Hannah, a state of emergency.
So she talks about, look at how hot the temperature of these fires got, so much that it decimated this metal signpost, but it left the other trees around her still standing. Maybe because it has electricity involved and it's conducted, the metal signpost conducts the electricity towards it more so than the wooden trees around you that are far more flammable. And as she says, the hot spot popped up out of the ground. That's like a Freudian slip. She accidentally told the truth that it comes up out of the ground, the frozen ground around her.
Everywhere. I mean, we've been smelling it all morning. And just as I'm talking to you, a hot spot actually popped up over here. So you can actually see on the frozen ground the smoke coming up from this area. Now we're keeping our distance from that, obviously, because we don't want to get too close because that area of the ground is really hot. But this is what firefighters are up against, even in this area that is.
And they're widespread. There's multiple simultaneous fires, not just in one spot of New York.
On these highways and this areas to keep people away from anywhere where you're going to see things. Like the area of West Hampton has not been evacuated, but Hannah, they are bracing for that on the off chance that this does really pick up. And then just across the border there, over into New Jersey, there were brush fires kind of raging all week. Those have calmed down a bit, but again.
And it's important for them to keep people away from the areas where you're going to see things.
That is a concern, but on the ground, the firefighters and the first responders have been really, really cautious of closing down these highways and these areas to keep people away from anywhere where you're going to see things like the area of West today and into the week. So that is a concern, but on the ground, the firefighters and the first responders have been really, really cautious of closing down these highways and these areas to keep people away from anywhere where you're going to see things like the area of West Hampton has not been evacuated, but Hannah, they are bracing for that on the off chance that this does really pick up. And then just across the border there, over into New Jersey, there were brush fires kind of raging all week. Those have calmed down a bit, but again, these.
So that was a clip that was presented by Tracy and Shane at the Brush Junkie channel, and he makes an observation here that's very notable.
Pole was like steel and it was still relatively intact, but the aluminum side was like there was barely anything left of it. So that was at least 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah.
So 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, melting that sign would have burnt the trees right next to it if it wasn't electricity and it was standard fire, but it's not. In this video on the Brush Junkie channel, Why is Long Island Burning Now During Cold, Humid Weather, they go on to show you that they got rain on Wednesday just before the fire on Saturday. A week before that, the fires in the Carolinas, they had received rain on Thursday prior to the fires that happened on that weekend. And they say, well, it was just a little bit and it wasn't enough to saturate the area. They try to normalize it and explain away why under these conditions, these kind of fires are normal and usual and to be expected under these conditions. But then if you look into it, what do you mean these conditions? There is no fire season in this part of the country. It's constantly humid. They received rain a couple days before the fires. Prior to that, there was the hurricanes that flooded everything in the Carolinas. And so I'm glad that Tracy and Shane are collecting some of the clues and doing some of the footwork of the investigation. But they've already got their verdict and their conviction of the cause of these fires. In the Carolina fires, they were saying, well, we haven't figured out exactly what the motive is for these fires in this area because the smart city is nearby, but not in the area that burned. And maybe some underground minerals that they want to go mine, but that's not in this area either. Maybe it's for the housing development that they want to make, that they'll house the workers for the mining process 5 or 10 miles away. That's called prejudice. A prejudicial judgment. Before the evidence is in, you're not interested in going wherever the evidence leads. You already have your verdict. You already have your conviction. You just need to pile up enough evidence and configure it in a way that it supports your foregone conclusion that you already know that someone did this. We just got to figure out who and why.
Okay. So as we saw there, they had rain just a few days before the fire, and dew points were high, humidities were high during that event, that storm. But then they're trying to claim that by Saturday they had low relative humidities, and that's what helped cause the fire conditions. And I just find that
what's interesting, it usually happens after the fire, the storm, since they maybe made a mistake.
yeah,
Typically will. Okay, so I didn't have my microphone on a second ago, but what I was saying is that I'm glad that Tracy and Shane are collecting the clues and doing some of the investigation footwork. But they've already got their foregone conclusion. The verdict is in. They've already got their conviction. They just need to find and arrange and configure enough evidence to support their foregone conclusion that somebody's doing this. In the Carolina fires, they said, we haven't quite figured out the motive as to why they made these fires in this area. They say the 15-minute city isn't quite exactly in this area. And the underground mining where they want to grab some lithium from, that's not exactly in this area either, but maybe they want to build a housing development to house all of the labor that they're going to import for the purposes of the mining, like Scooby-Doo chasing down Old Man Withers. They're dead set. They got their hearts set on pulling the mask off of Old Man Withers. In this case, they said, well, normally they bring in the rainstorm after the fires to create the mudslides, you know, and maybe they just got it backwards. They got the carriages in front of the horses on this one, and they messed up. They made a mistake. They meant to bring the rainstorm in after the fire, but they accidentally brought it in before the fire. And they almost have oppositional defiance disorder at this point. They don't want to say the word electricity when they see the melted signpost. Probably after I gave them a tongue lashing when they brought Dane Wigington on from the Geoengineering Watch and let him say shit like, well, you know, there is no energy involved in these fires. It's just that everything is dried out from the aluminum dust particles, which also acts as an accelerant. And the reason the trees burn on the inside is just because there's a crack in the bark and the flame gets in the inside. There's mountains of evidence I've amassed over the last 7 years. It is no longer a debate and no longer a question as to whether or not there is electricity in these fires. It is certain if you're willing to look at the evidence. They no longer are willing to consider the idea that there's not some nefarious forces behind this, pushing the button and pulling the levers and doing this. They just haven't quite figured out what the motive is for this fire, why they did this at this time in this place. But they're sure that this is done intentionally by people. They are no longer following the evidence wherever it leads, open-minded, considering the possibility that this is geomagnetic induction, part of a natural cycle of the earth, and that there aren't nefarious forces behind it. It makes them feel better, because it makes you feel powerless if you conceive that this is a natural process. Natural forces are at work behind this. That makes you feel powerless. If you're chasing down Old Man Withers, it makes you feel powerful and like gives you a reason to get up in the morning and continue the fight. Because if it's not something you can fight against, you don't like the way that makes you feel, so you block that out of your mind and you continue with your myopic tunnel vision chasing Old Man Withers. I've gone way above and beyond proving that this is electricity flowing through the wood that follows the grain of the wood. This is a piece from the video titled Plasma Fire 101, Overview for Beginners, where I'm showing that the electricity follows the grain of the wood. Here, all of these trees are hollowed out on the inside, and the outer shell wood of bark remains.
And all at once by Jack.
That's not possible with just a crack in the bark that burns out the inside of the tree and leaves the outer shell unburned. That's proof it is electricity. Trees consist of two types of wood. The heartwood on the inside that is wet, soft, and flexible, and the outer shell, which creates a lattice or a framework, that is rigid and dry and non-flexible, harder. And in these fires, the electricity burns out the inside of the trees. There is no possible way a spark that gets, a flame that gets through the crack in the bark would leave the trees in this condition and somehow burn out the inside but not the outside. Why didn't the same flame that made its way to the inside continue to burn the outside of the tree? Dane? It's obvious there's electricity here. but they're not serious about the pursuit of the truth. They have other motives. They want something that makes them feel good. The evidence speaks for itself. It's not up for debate. It's non-negotiable. It's a foregone conclusion. That's why I say there is no path that leads to the truth about these fires that doesn't go through the gate of electricity. They have oppositional defiance disorder. They stand in opposition, stand in defiance, and are unwilling to even acknowledge electricity. Like Stuart Smalley in Saturday Night Live. No, I can do it myself. I can do it myself. But look, it's electricity. No, I'm going to find out the truth my own way. Some other truth. There's plenty of things to be discovered. That's just step one in the process of the investigation. If you refuse to go through that gate and acknowledge electricity, whatever you discover yourself, your own way, that doesn't include electricity, is not the truth. They want to go, look what I can do. Look what I can do.